You're listening to the Inside Syracuse Basketball podcast presented by Crouse Health, the exclusive healthcare partner of Syracuse Athletics.
Well, welcome back to another edition of the Inside Syracuse Basketball podcast. My guest today, as you can see, is my colleague, Donna Ditota. Donna, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm down here in the basement of our office and hoping nothing dramatic happens, but okay, let's go.
Yeah, I thought I recognized the stone wall behind you there in our, it's like the bat cave of syracuse.com.
Yeah.
Well, wanted to talk with you today about last Friday, where Syracuse held both its basketball media day and then in the evening moved over to the JMA Wireless Dome and held its annual Orange Madness event, which gave us our really first look at Adrian Autry's new roster. And I don't know, let's talk about what we kind of observed, what we noticed. I don't like making big assumptions based on a random intra-squad scrimmage, but I don't know, what was your biggest takeaway?
It was honestly just good to see the players. We haven't seen them in so long. And it was just good to see guys, and it was, for me, the most important thing was to see the new guys. Like, I hadn't seen Kyle Cuff play. I hadn't seen Chance Westry play. And those were the two guys I was really interested in. And then, Naheem, it was interesting to see him. And it just was like an interesting introduction to a lot of guys. Like, I've seen JJ play a ton of times, so nothing JJ would have done would have been super surprising, but all these other guys really have not seen that much. So that was the best thing about it, I think, is just to get an introduction to all the new guys.
Yeah, and the introduction, started with media day in the afternoon over at the Mello Center. And, you mentioned two of the guys that we really hadn't seen much before, because both Chance Westry and Kyle Cuff have played very limited ball at the college level due to injuries last year. You know what? The first thing you and I think we both noticed was when the game started, Judah Mintz and JJ Starling were on the same team. And that meant Chance and Kyle Cuff, the new guys, were the opposing backcourt. And at first I was kind of like, well, why are they doing it that way? I kind of wanted to see Judah and JJ go up against each other.
Yeah, but I think what they did was they put the two starting, what we presume is going to be the two starting backcourt guys together, and then what we would presume would be the starting front court together, because the front court of the other team was Benny, Chris Bell, and Naheem. And that's a reasonable expectation for a front court. So I think they just that's how they did it. And also, I think it's good to have, if you're going to have those two guys be your starting backcourt, it's good to have them play them together as much as possible.
Yeah, and I guess if it is good to play Judah and JJ together as much as you can if they're going to be the starters. And as I thought it through as well, if you had Judah and JJ on opposite teams going against each other, then that would have meant you're going to ask Kyle Cuff at about 6'1", guard Chance Westry, who's 6'6", and he's all of 6'6". And
yeah, Chance is a big guy.
That would have been kind of a weird dynamic. But all right, so you said you were most interested in seeing Chance Westry and Kyle Cuff, or maybe not most interested, but very interested.
I was just curious about those two guys.
So what did you think?
I thought both of them were good. Both of them sort of came as advertised. I thought everybody when I had done a story about Chance pretty soon after he committed, and everybody said he's just a really dynamic guy, loves to attack the basket, he's a good passer, he's a big, strong, physical guy, and that's exactly what we saw. And Kyle, I think I called him in my story like the mystery guy of the four, right? Because he hasn't played for 2 years.
Right.
So I was really interested to see anything about him, honestly. And what intrigued me the most about him was he's a really good shooter, apparently, because he won the 3-point shooting contest, and that 3-point shooting stroke looked nice on a night when not a whole lot of guys made threes. I think it's part of it is because they don't practice in the dome, and the sightlines are different, and so I think that's why I think the team is much better shooting team than what they displayed at the thing on Friday night. But I thought it was interesting to see that he was a pretty good shooter.
Yeah, I'll get to the 3-point shooting in a second. Kyle Cuff, what I had been told about him is, hey, this guy's an explosive athlete.
Yeah.
He's going to help Syracuse play the kind of aggressive man-to-man defense that Adrian Autry has been talking about. And that was on display because he was getting after the guy, guys. And I forget who he took it from. It would have had to have been either Judah or JJ. He took it from one of those guys out in the open floor and took it the other way for a layup. And I'm like, man, if you're taking the ball off of either of those two guys, you got some quick hands.
Yeah, and it's always good to see too. Both of those guys are coming off injuries, and what they look like, and obviously they've had a lot of time sort of acclimate and get sort of shake the rust off a little bit. But it's always good to see, what they look like after they've come back from both of them had knee injuries. So,
what'd you think of the two other guards? I mean, we're talking about these new guys, Chance and Kyle, but so why do we think of Judah and JJ out there?
I thought Judah looked great. I mean, he looked like the guy that we expect him to be this year. And I thought JJ was really good too. I mean, again, it's hard to really say too much about what happens in a, 20-minute scrimmage. Was it 20 minutes? I don't even remember how long the scrimmage lasted. It was not that long. And
it was a running clock.
It's a running clock. And, so it's hard to tell precisely what's going on. But I think, like I've said this before, the guards are going to be the strength of the team. I think they have very good guards. I think they have good small forwards. I think what the key to this team is going to be the center spot and the power forward spot and what they can get from those two positions. And I think the guards are going to be good.
Okay, then I wasn't going to go there now, but since you brought it up, forward and power forward and center, the two starting centers on either, the orange and the blue or whatever it was, orange and the white. Naheem McLeod was on one side, 7'4", transfer from Florida State. And then you had Malik Brown start for the other team center, 6'9" sophomore. We both remarked at media day, I thought Malik looked a little bigger.
Malik looks bigger. Malik looks bigger and stronger. Yep.
I thought he played well too. He looked very comfortable in the pick and rolls. He often off little lobs from one from Justin Taylor was really pretty.
I've talked a lot about Malik, and we've talked a lot about Malik, and I think Malik's. I love him at center. I think he's exactly what the kind of guy you need there. He's mobile. He's smart. He's gotten a little bit bigger, so he's probably a lot more physical than he was last year. He can pass. He can rebound. He's just a guy who's going to give you what you need in various situations. And I just loved him. And I think he should play center, and I think he probably will play a lot of center this year.
Yeah, and as you noted before, he was in that backcourt he had Judah and JJ on his team. So I think that was really interesting to see him run some of those pick and rolls.
Right.
And, sometimes a big man doesn't roll naturally to the basket, but he seemed to really have that down.
He's just a smart kid. I think he's a smart, very intuitive basketball player. And I think that's a trait that's really kind of overlooked sometimes.
So we're intrigued with center and power forward. If Malik Brown's at center, that means Benny's your power forward at those times, because Malik can play both.
He can. Benny gives you a little more versatility, and then he can step out and make a three. And I think the big thing with Benny that I was really impressed with on Friday is he really rebounded the ball, and they're going to need rebounders. And it seemed to me like he got every rebound for the Orange team. He was around the basket. He tried to rebound the ball, and he put it on the deck a little bit and went past a couple of guys. I thought he looked really good. He played sort of freely and looked like an athlete,
Yeah.
And I just thought he played well.
Going back to the center position, I'm intrigued with Naheem McLeod. We know this. Let's admit it. The big guy is
he's
amazing.
a big guy.
He is a big dude. I don't think he's, I know he's not going to be a 30-minute a game sort of center. It's just not going to happen for a 7'4", 255-pound guy. And I do like Malik. So I think there's a lot of minutes at center, but I'm still intrigued with Naheem. I think you put him out there, and whether you want to play man-to-man or, dare I say it, a little bit of zone, he can be a guy who's going to make teams think about coming to the basket.
Yeah, I think he's a prototypical zone center. He's a big guy who takes up a lot of space, and can protect. And we assume he can protect the basket. I don't know if you're going to play fast, and if you're going to get up and down, and if that's the kind of offense you want to run. I'm not sure where a 7'4" guy fits in at that point. But I think he's interesting, for a bunch of different reasons.
Hey,
because he's tall. He's extremely tall.
Going back to when I was a little kid, I remember seeing Washington Bullets teams run, and Wes Unseld was the center, and he didn't run. He outletted the ball and waved goodbye.
Well, it would be good to have a guy who outlets the ball and then runs. That would be better. That's just me, but I think that would be better. Because people are going to miss when you outlet the ball and let somebody to rebound it.
Speaking of missing,
Yeah.
Okay, this is perfect, Donna. You're awesome at this. Speaking of misses, they didn't make a lot of threes. They missed a lot of threes in the scrimmage. I only had 2 makes, one from Justin Taylor and one late in the scrimmage from Quadir Copeland.
Yeah.
You and I were talking as we were leaving the dome later, and I'm in like, this is going to be a problem. And you're kind of like, first time in the dome, blah, blah, blah.
I don't think it's going to be a problem.
Okay.
I know. I mean, I think they have enough guys who can shoot that they can figure out that day who has the hot hand or who can make shots, and those guys will play a little bit more. I think they have enough guys who can make them though. And you mentioned Quadir, and I think we have not touched on Quadir, who is the leading scorer in this game,
11?
and who I think brings a ton of intangibles. His enthusiasm, his energy level, and he scored twice on Naheem in this game. He took him on the baseline, and he made a nice fadeaway jumper in the lane against him. I think he's a really interesting guy too. I mean, he can do a lot of things. He came to Syracuse as a point guard. Yep. He can handle the ball. He's a tough kid. He really rebounded last year from the small forward spot, and I find him to be very, very interesting.
And at media day, going back to earlier in the day, Adrian Autry made a point of saying that Quadir's really worked on his shot.
That's right.
And yeah, so if the shot's improved, he's a guy, he can be the Swiss Army knife for this team. You could put him in at multiple positions because he can guard multiple guys because of his size and his athleticism. It's interesting. He was the leading scorer in the whole scrimmage, and he only had 1 point at halftime. He scored 10 of his 11 in the second half. He really got involved.
Yeah, and I think that's what he does. I think that's what he can do. Again, his energy level, and I think he's a pretty smart player. I think some of his flamboyance, was one of his downfalls last year, and I think he's gotten you can't tell. It's just one scrimmage, but I assume he's gotten a little bit better at a little bit more mature about how he plays, and I just think he can be a valuable guy, especially if he can make threes this year.
Chris Bell didn't make a 3. Justin Taylor only made 1. I think those are your 2 best 3-point shooters. We saw them make shots last year. Whatever they went on Friday night in an Orange Madness event, even though it was kind of like, you want to see them go in. I agree with you. They should shoot the ball. It'll be interesting to see if they're on the floor, though, at the same time much, because they're both that small forward, maybe can play a little 2 guard, and now the backcourt seems to be kind of full. What did you just think of those 2 guys? They're both rising sophomores, or I guess we just call them sophomores now.
I consider all those guys guards. I consider Quadir, Justin, Chris, and the 4 other guys we talk about. They're all guards to me. And I think they're going to play a lot of guards. I mean, Adrian has said to me at one point, you may play 4 guards at the same time. They're going to play a lot of guards because I think if the style of play that they want to play, they want to get up and down. If they want to get a lot of things going like that, playing a lot of guards makes a lot of sense. The thing I loved about Chris Bell from the other night was he attacked the basket, and it wasn't just once, it was a couple of times, and he put the ball on the floor and attacked the basket. And that's one thing that he did not do at all last year, and that's really going to help him, because teams that now close out on him, thinking of him as only a shooter, if he can get by them off the dribble, it's going to be really, really, really another weapon that he can have this year.
Either get by him off the dribble or just a pump fake and let the defender fly by and then put the ball on the floor and go. He did do that too, at least a couple times.
He did
the other night. And and it's something, going back to one of the other 4, Benny Williams. It's something that Adrian Autry has said a couple of times this offseason. We saw him shoot a little bit last year. He can make a 3. Doesn't shoot a lot of them, but he can make one. Adrian thought the real improvement in Benny's game that could make him increase in scoring or whatever is finishing at the basket. And has he gotten bigger or stronger? And he's definitely gotten taller.
He's taller. And I think he's a little bigger too. And I think, honestly, again, it's the whole thing about the maturation of these guys' games. I think he, at some point you understand like what it is that you need to do to help your team. And I think this probably is a year for Benny. I think he's going to be, he's like, I was joking with him the other day at media day. Like, he's like the most experienced guy on the team, right? He's a a junior and among a whole bunch of guys who are coming back who are much younger. And I think Naheem is older than him, and maybe Munir is older than him, but he has the most experience in a Syracuse uniform. And I think with that experience comes a little bit more maturity. And I think he's going to maybe at this point, well, I'm hoping at this point, he's going to understand like what kinds of things he needs to do to help his team. I think making 3-point shots is important because it'll open up the lane for a lot of the drivers. But I also think he needs to be a little more physical and needs to mix it up a little bit more inside. And I think, let's see if he can do that. If he can do that, he's going to be extremely valuable this year.
Could be, it's an interesting group. You'll get to see him again on Saturday night, this upcoming Saturday in Rochester when they do their Monroe Madness. They're less than 2 weeks from the first exhibition game against Damon.
I know. The season is almost here, Mike.
I know. Yeah. Ken Pomeroy's rankings came out over the weekend. I don't know if you got to look at them.
I saw them. Yeah, I did.
100. Syracuse came in at 105.
Right.
You know what? It sounds really low. It kind of is, but it's higher than where they finished last season. And I know part of last year has to go into whatever Ken Pomeroy
his first few, you don't really call them polls. I mean, his first few things that he puts out are very heavily weighted on the previous year. So they're 105 primarily because they were very bad last year in Ken Pom. So I think that they will improve. And we haven't played a game yet. So, I'm really looking forward to like some real games and some, like, I don't even think the exhibitions are going to be all that, visionary in terms of what the team is going to look like, just because these teams are going to be so overmatched. But I'm really intrigued by the personnel on this team, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen. I mean, I think they're going to be fun to watch. And let's just see. I'm looking forward to like really seeing these guys play against, some pretty good competition and see where they stack up.
Yeah, I agree with you. You can't put a whole lot of stock in Ken Pom's initial rankings because there's no games played yet. But we just kind of look at it in broad terms. You did notice 4 non-conference games are against teams that are currently in his top 50.
Oh, yeah.
LSU, Oregon, and at least 2 games in Hawaii. I mean, they had the opener against Tennessee and then a second round game that's going to be against either Purdue or Gonzaga. Those are 4 top 50 games. That's we already knew it was a tough schedule, but it kind of like crystallizes it for you.
Yeah, I think thought it was funny during the media session when somebody asked Adrian, like, what went into making your schedule this year? And he was like, hold up, like, I did not make this schedule. I mean, this is not the schedule you want with your inaugural year as a head coach. It's going to be a very, very tough preseason, pre-ACC, I guess.
It really is, because in those 4 don't even include like a road trip to Georgetown.
Yeah.
So that's going to be thrown in there. And, I also noticed too, we'll see how these other teams do, but nobody right now in the, outside the top 300, from like 301 to 350, whatever. I think New Hampshire with the regular season opener, New Hampshire's at 300. That's the lowest rated team. That's good because it's those really, really bad teams that can also drag down your net ranking. Yeah. And look at me. It's October and I'm already like talking Ken Pom and net rankings.
Yeah, well, an interesting thing, I asked all the guys the other day, like, what game are you most looking forward to? And there's a whole bunch of different kind of answers. And nobody said Clemson, which I thought was interesting because they'd be playing against Joe. And nobody said Colgate, who has beaten them for 2 straight years, which is also interesting, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I keep saying the word interesting because that's like, that is my mantra going into the season. It's interesting. There's so many interesting pieces. There's so many intriguing storylines. I think it's just going to be fun. It's going to be fun to see how the first few weeks shake out.
It definitely will. And it's right around the corner. October 27th, the first exhibition against Damon. Another one the following week against the College of St. Rose. And then the regular season home opener against New Hampshire on Monday, November 6th. It's going to be here before we know it. But Donna, listen, thanks for joining us here on the podcast. Because
I'm going to get out of the basement, leaving the basement, go back to the office.
Yeah, we'll let you about that. We'll let you out of the basement there. Go back up. Say hello to the rest of our colleagues.
I will.
We'll look forward to having you on the podcast again real soon, okay?
All right, Mike.
Thanks, Don.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Join us next time for the Inside Syracuse Basketball podcast presented by Crouse Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse Athletics.